Welcome to CoCo's Conjure. Here we discuss all things conjure, hoodoo, wellness, folklore, and the occasional personal spiritual story. My goal is to give foundational knowledge and a touch of inspiration to help others build or add to their personal practice or their magical practice. If you haven't guessed already, my name is CoCo. I am so blessed to have you here with me today. If you would be so kind, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe to the channel or the podcast wherever you found me. I would appreciate it. Every culture the world round can find practitioners of the supernatural and masters of elemental forces at their roots. I'd argue that in modern day, where the line between magical traditions and culture are not so easily defined due to internet discourse, the universal term for a supernatural practitioner, easily understood by all, is witch. Today, the term witch is tied to almost all alternative spiritual practices, neo-pagans, and anything not in the realm of Abrahamic faiths. Abrahamic faiths would be faiths that stem from Abraham, like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Like, today when we think witch, we think big-tittied woman or charismatic men tending to plants on their windowsill gardens, preaching the benefits of going outside and pouring out one for the land spirits. And then you add aesthetic on top of that. You know what I mean? The Instagrammable witch with their max decor altars and black garments and tall hats and a rainbow of candles and crystals surrounding a bathtub filled with herbs and flowers. Almost like the idea that the beauty is a part of the magic they are wielding. I respect this form of craft and the people who present their craft in that way, but I feel as though anytime a newcomer walks into the magical community, they think anyone with an altar and candles and ceremonial wear is a witch. But that's not the case. Not everyone who has a spiritual practice is a witch. And it's not just newcomers. Of course, anyone and everyone nowadays is applying the word witch or witchcraft to anything spiritual. In a Tik Tok video over a year ago, Pastor Gregory Lock walks into his local Books A Million and starts freaking out over the spiritual section. He claims yoga mats and The Secret and dream catchers are all a part of the witch and demon agenda. At one point, he even says, and y'all, this is word for word, he says, "Burning sage does not cleanse the room. Burning sage brings demons." He's like, oh, witchcraft is everywhere. And guess what's in this section right behind it? Dungeons and Dragons. Y'all, the whole video is hilarious and wrong. It's just hilarious, wrong, and loud. Which, if you ask me, is the worst kind of wrong. As much as we joke, and as insane as it is, Pastor Gregory Lock pointed out a flaw in considering anything and everything magical and supernatural witchcraft. Sage burning is a sacred act for some of the First Nation peoples. Most folk magic traditions also burn herbs and resins for healing and soul cleansing. I'd bet $10 that the First Nation person smudging themselves wouldn't call it witchcraft. Neither are their dream catchers. These are spiritual expressions weaved within their culture. And this is a culture that goes back before, way before, anyone who looked like Pastor Gregory Lock stepped foot on this land. Way before Christianity ever came to the Americas. Yoga stems from a religious practice, and it found its way into the lives of folks who just want to train their bodies. Regardless if a yoga practitioner believes their practice is religious and spiritual or just secular, they would not call themselves a witch or deem it part of witchcraft. Now, a witch might be a yogi, but yoga itself is about balance and wholeness and wellness. It's connected to a religion, sure, but if you're secular, it's just about training yourself, training your body, and allowing yourself to be centered and whole. There's no witchcraft in that. What I'm getting at is, what Pastor Locke and the new witch are missing is that spirituality is complex. And you cannot just point and scream witchcraft to any and everything in the spiritual section at your local Books A Million. A witch may partake in various traditions as a foundation to their practice, but even still, cultural context needs to be applied. Or else, we run the risk of miscategorizing anything and everything spiritual and magical as witchcraft. we lose out on the color of culture. As a hoodoo, I would not readily call myself a witch. Up to this point, anytime you've heard me refer to myself as a gray witch, for example, it's always been in context of someone else calling me that. And I do that because I'm not sure how many of you cousins are coming out of the witchcraft space before you decided to explore your hoodoo roots. But yeah, if someone were to ask me how I label my practice, I would say I'm a hoodoo. I would never call myself a witch. Now, I'm not saying that the title of witch is bad. There are plenty of hoodoos out there who call themselves a witch. It's not something to get angry about or upset about. It's a catch-all term for all magical and spiritual people, like I said. The reason why I don't identify with the term witch is because my cultural roots are a foundation on which my entire practice is founded. And in hoodoo, a witch is a thing. A witch is a cryptid, like Bigfoot or the Mothman. A witch is the boo hag. In true CoCo fashion, I'm going to tell you a story. This story is like a dialogue from American Negro Folktales as collected by Richard M. Dorson. Y'all know I love Richard M. Dorson's book. It's very good for foundational understanding. In this dialogue, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, those are real people, by the way. It's not an alias. He really did interview two people, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. So Mr. and Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Mary Richardson talk about the times they were ridden by the boo hag and discuss the best methods to ward them off or to catch them. Take a listen to this tale. Well, I had a witch or something ride me once, Mr. Smith said. I don't know what the deuce it was. I heard it before day in the morning. Yeah, I heard it when it come in the house. I was awake. It come up on the bed, and I could feel it when it pressed the bed. Me and the other fella was in the bed together, and it got up on me, and I couldn't say a word. I lay flat on my back, and I commenced to twisting this away and that, and whining in my sleep. And the boy catched me, and I heard the thing when it hit the floor, about like a big rat, boop, bop, bip, and out the door it went. You can hear it go out. I said, "You better go, you devil." It was about 4:00 in the morning. Now that's true. Mr. Smith, I know you ain't joking, Mrs. Richardson said. Because listen, I laid down one day at 12 o'clock. My husband went to carry the mule to the lot while I cooked dinner. I had some time, so I said, well, I'll take a little nap. I laid down and began to read one of those birthday almanacs. You know, I was interested in reading. It looked like a shadow come over my eyes, but I wasn't asleep. And I saw a woman in the door. Both the doors were open. I lived in a little 2-room house, and I was lying across the bed. And she walked in, and she stepped straddling me, and she got me. And she just started doing this away. Ruh, 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 ruh. And she shook me till I said, well, Lord, I know I'm going to die. I give up to die. Then I heard when she hit the floor, vlop. And she got off me and walked right out the door. And that was 12 o'clock in the day. Didn't look like I went to sleep. I hadn't made time to go to sleep. She just overshadowed me and rolled me till I was drunk. Well, I heard my grandfather tell it, interjected Mr. Smith. He said that back in slavery times, there was a woman they called a mammarai, and the boys all teased her. She was a witch. And you'd hear her coming, zip, 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 zip. They'd say, where you going, mammarai? She says, boy, you better get going. I'll give you devil before the day in the morning. Granddad said one would have to stay awake while the other slept. That was the only way they could go to get some sleep. I heard him tell that more than one time when I was little. Well, that story must have sparked something in Mrs. Smith, because she said, in the daytime, I used to see a woman, had on a little old kind of reddish dress about the color of this lamp. She'd come across that bridge and just be walking alone till she would get right even by my mailbox, and then she would just go out, just disappear. And we used to hear something in the basement, big as a man, just like whoopity whoop, whoopity whoop, whoopity whoop, whoopity whoop, whoopity whoop. And I'd take a flashlight down there and look, but you wouldn't see anything. They tried their best to run us out of here, but I just kept praying and put out salt and put up horseshoes and burned red pepper. Well, I heard folks say take a broom and lay it in the door and they won't walk over the broom, said Mrs. Richardson. They'll sit there all night counting the straws in the broom, and when day comes, you'll see them look like a little jug. Ain't you ever seen Foxfire? Said Mrs. Smith. Well, I heard people say they look just like Foxfire, said Mrs. Richardson. Well, when I was about 10 or 11 years old, Mrs. Smith started, I was working with some white people, and this man, about the nicest white man I ever wanted to see, was telling me, "Did you know, Z, a witch rode me last night?" He used to call me Z, wouldn't say Leozi. His girl was named Vera, and he called her V, and he called me Z. He said, "Look here, how I got my hair turned." He was redheaded. We were always taught that redheaded people was the meanest men there was. So I said, maybe it's 'cause you're so mean. But he said, "You know, a witch just rode me last night. Rode me, and rode me until I couldn't sleep." Well, you know, way back then, they had those great big round sifters to sift out flour meal this way, that way. "Mr. Sparks," I said, "Mama said if you take this sifter and put some salt on it and a handful of salt and turn it bottom side upwards, you'll catch that witch. And the next morning, when you wake up, the witch will be there." And oh, he used to just laugh and take me up on his lap. So this night when I come down, I always come to tell everybody good night before I went home, 'cause it wasn't so far. I couldn't run all the way home. He told me, "Hunzy, come early in the morning. We're going to have that witch, 'cause I'm going to throw the sifter down tonight." And he said, "Z, I want you to get me a big handful of salt and put it down at my bed and bring that sifter and turn it down." So I did. I got a big heap full of that kind of coarse, heavy salt down. And then they take that big old sifter and turned it down when he got into bed. The next morning, I woke up early. "I'm just going down to Sparks' Dam early this morning, going to catch that witch," I told my mother. And when I got down there, they hadn't awoke, so I knocked on the door. One of the boys was sleeping in the other room, long about my age. He opened the door. They was always so tickled when I come early. We'd have a row. I say, "Ivy, let's go see Daddy catch the witch." So we eased in there and looked, and man, you know, we see the spider about as big as my hand. And I said, "Hi, Mr. Sparks." And he said, "What's the matter?" I said, "I done caught a witch." He hopped up and looked, and you know, that old spider's legs had gone down in the wire of that sifter and had swolled up underneath. And on top, he couldn't pull them out. He was the biggest spider you ever seen in your life, and he had a big, wide mouth, about an inch wide. And he was making his mouth like this. And he looked like he had 2 lips. Now that is just as true as we look at each other. And if Mr. Sparks was living, he could tell you. We caught that big old spider in the sifter. So I said, I guess that old witch had turned, and that's the last thing he could turn into. And so the spider was the witch. They take him outdoors and put some kerosene on him and some straw and a sifter over it and burned him up. Then they threw the sifter away. Now you know why I said the boo hag or the witch in Hoodoo is a cryptid. This is like a vampire or unholy spirit riding people and stealing their breath. Almost like where they call it sleep paralysis demons. Thankfully, the Smiths and Mrs. Richardson told us ways to get rid of the boo hag. First, you can speak over your situation. "You better go, devil," you know, that kind of thing. You know, an old coworker of mine, she is from 3 towns over where my grandmother used to live in South Carolina. So she also grew up in the back sticks. She made her way to Maryland after her mom passed away. So I had gone over to her new apartment that she had, And she was telling me that a witch was on her chest the night before. I was like, oh dear God, like you need to get like some salt water and mop your floor and say Psalm 23. And like, I was at the beginning of my journey, so I'm out here spitting out whatever I think is right. And she was like, nah, girl, I just did what my mama told me to do. And I said, you better get the hell away from me, witch. I call on the name of Jesus. You better get away from me, witch. Like, she said, and so she went back to sleep. And when she woke up again, everything was fine. I was like, oh, that's when I realized, like, okay, yeah, not everything requires a 12-step process. Sometimes you just say it out loud and then that solves the problem. So you have the Smiths with the "You better go, devil," and Mrs. Smith called out the Lord's name, and we're pretty sure that helped her out in her situation because she thought she was about to die. The witch was riding her so hard. Then, of course, Mrs. Richardson gave a full recipe to get rid of the boo hag. Outside of prayer, she put up horseshoes for luck, spread out salt, and smoked the area using red peppers. And this is good because from Mrs. Smith's tale, we know for sure salt will work even on hags that shapeshift into other things like spiders. There was a couple other tales, not just from Dorson's book, but from, I found it on JSTOR, child. I don't even remember the name of that text, but there were other accounts where they find that the witch or the boo hag turned into like cats, or they inhabited, someone you love, or like a person in the neighborhood, a person in the community. So, it's good to know that salt works on those kind of things. And brooms too. One of my favorite parts of this tale is the broom at the front door. It was originally explained to me that Black American couples would jump the broom at their weddings so they could start their life fresh together, new. The act of jumping the broom removed whatever gunk was on their relationship up to that point. But when I started to dig a little deeper, I realized it was also a precaution, so that neither one of the newlyweds were trapped by a boo hag in matrimony. So yeah, that's why we jump the broom when we get married. So at this point, I was going to do another story segment about this bachelor named Aaron and how he married a boo hag that stole the breath from all the men in his town. But storyteller Donna Washington did such a phenomenal job. I'd recommend watching her tell it. You can find her performance titled Boo Hag on the PBS World of Stories series. Just type that in Google or go into the show notes and you'll find it. It's such a great performance. She's a really brilliant storyteller. Here's a Cliff Notes version of Ms. Washington's story. This bachelor found himself married to a boo hag. Once he realized his mistake, he went to the old woman in the swamp and she gave him some clear instructions. In order to get rid of his wife, the boo hag, the bachelor had to wait till the boo hag slipped out of her skin that night. Then he had to paint every part of his house blue, windows, doors, everything, and then sprinkle salt all over the hag's skin. And he had to do it before the sun came up. Now, from the outsider looking in, especially in our interconnected online magical communities, it's the old woman in the swamp who's the witch, and the boo hag is just some cryptid creature. But you go ahead and listen to Ms. Washington's story. Word for word, she says. But here's the thing about it. If you ever in a story like this and you have a problem, go find an old woman who lives all by herself. She'll figure out what to do. Not once does Miss Washington refer to this woman as a witch. She's just an old woman who knows some stuff. No, it's the boo hag slipping out of her skin every night. That's the witch of this tale. That kind of reminds me of what Grandma said when I interviewed her a couple episodes ago. The first thing she told us was, back in the day, there wasn't a lot of knowledge going on, but they always had wisdom, right? You got to go find the old wise woman on the edge of the city in the swamp in order to figure out what to do with your supernatural problem. We would call her a witch today, but that's just not who she was back then. Not in folk magic tradition, not in folk magic traditions, and definitely not in hoodoo. That old woman was just somebody who knew some stuff. She was wise beyond her years. Or like Miss Taylor in Grandma's story. Miss Taylor was, what did Grandma call her? Miss Taylor was a faith-believing woman. Not at any time in any place would my grandmother refer to her as a witch. She was a faith-believing woman who knew how to use some things in order to bring about healing. That's who she was. Not a witch. So yeah, we need to be careful what we call witchcraft and who we call witches. I can see that the word witch has a different connotation now, and it's easy to just call everyone a witch because, I don't know, it feels like it's a catch-all term. However, not every spiritual tradition can be categorized as witchcraft, and not every practitioner is a witch on the simple basis of cultural context not allowing for it. Yeah, there are different spiritual tracks, there are different religions, and just because someone is practicing outside of the Abrahamic realm of faith doesn't make them a witch. They are a shaman or a manbo or a strega or a bruja or, in my case, a hoodoo. Okay. So if you've made it this far into the podcast, you know what's coming next. If you're new, I'm going to tell you. So at this point, I usually pull a question from Reddit or Facebook or wherever, and I read it and try my best to answer it. This first question is from Reddit. It says, tattoos and blood rituals. Here's the question. Someone who practices witchcraft has invited me to go with her to get a tattoo in memory of someone we were both very close to on their birthday. That's today. I got a weird feeling about this, but haven't canceled yet. Honestly, because I'm a little paranoid about her finding out why. I feel like it's some kind of blood ritual and she wants me there for a really bad reason. Is this crazy? Am I still at risk if I'm not there with her? Is there anything I can do to protect myself? Ooh, okay. Oh, okay. Tattoos and blood rituals, huh? So I know that there are Pacific Islanders, and I think Filipino culture where tattooing is like, it's not just an art form, it's like a cultural and spiritual rite of passage. Yes, there is bloodshed when you tattoo. That's the point of tattoos, right? To get below the skin. But like in that context, if you would call that a blood ritual, I wouldn't, but if you would call that a blood ritual, there's nothing wrong with it, right? Like it's a cultural and spiritual rite of passage. In this particular instance, it sounds like this witch friend of yours just wanted you to come and be supportive. Just wanted to share this moment with you when they commemorated an old friend. I'm not really sure where the blood ritual is in all this. Like, maybe some veneration, but that's about it. Like, there is no blood pacts. There is no selling of souls. It's just a tattoo. Like, not everything that's spiritual has to have some deep, dark underbelly meaning. It seems like perhaps in this case, the magic is in the remembrance. It's in the act of veneration, of getting a beloved friend's name or whatever tattooed on them. And because you also were close to this friend, it sounds like they just want some support from you. I'm not really sure what you need protection from. I'm not really sure what you're afraid of. I'm not going to say it's just a tattoo, because clearly this thing has meaning, but like, it's not some satanic burning of babies. Like, it's remembering a loved one. Not everything is witchcraft. Like that's what I was getting at in this story. Not everything is, like, in this podcast, I mean this episode, not everything is witchcraft. Not everything has these dark underbelly meanings or super intense I need to protect myself because this is a crazy ritual meaning. It's just your friend wanting your support as they go to venerate someone who passed away. I'm not sure what there is to be afraid of here. I think the thing that's weighing heavily on your mind is that this person is a witch. Self-identified maybe, but you consider them a witch. You know that they practice some sort of magical thing, and so you don't want to get tied up into whatever they're doing. And the assumption is that if they're a witch, whatever they're doing can't be good, or whatever they're doing could have some sort of cosmic backlash that might drip onto you too. This person, lost their friend. They might be in a little bit of pain. Obviously, this friend that you both shared must be someone phenomenal, because they want to get a tattoo in their memory. Like, that's magical enough. So I guess I would tell you, like, don't go. And not because I think it's some crazy blood ritual, but because I don't think you are the support system that this person needs or is looking for. I think that where your mind is and where her mind is, or his mind is somewhere different. And this person thought they were sharing something special with you, and you don't think it's that way. Like, you're afraid. And if you're afraid, you shouldn't go, even if contextually what you're afraid of has nothing to do with the reason why they want you to go. So yeah. Our next question comes from a Hoodoo message group on Facebook. The question reads, is using a total of 27 herbs and oils on a candle too much? Or can you use as many ingredients as you want to? Okay, there are a number of ways you can go about this. No pun intended. You could just pick through numerology, using that guide and aligning the number with your desire, your intention, and your work, to get the best results. You could do what your spirit tells you to do. And if your spirit tells you 27 herbs and spices, then it's 27 herbs and spices. Personally, and I recommend this, especially for people who are struggling trying to build their own work, I recommend the number 3. A coworker of mine, a while ago, I realized through conversation that she too was a practitioner. I don't think she identified as a hoodoo, but she definitely identified as a practitioner. And she told me that when she did work, she did everything in 3s. Her rituals took 3 days. her, she used, 3 herbs. She used 3 oils. She spoke her petition 3 times. She used 3 candles. She made sure she used at least 3 of the elements. Like everything was in 3 for her. And talking with her and just picking her brain, because when I realized I was new when I was talking to her, so I'm picking her brain, and I realized that 3 is like the perfect number, because outside of what 3 might spiritually mean, or outside of numerology, 3 meant that I had to choose. 3 meant that when I was building my work, I had to be very specific on what spirits I was choosing, on what tools I was using. You understand? So if I say I want cleansing, for example, well, anything cleanses. Lemon cleanses, coffee removes, hyssop cleanses, like all of the sage cleanses, rosemary will cleanse, like all of those things will do that, but if I pick 3, I have to be very specific on the type of cleansing I want. So if I want the kind of cleansing that comes from, I don't know, a divine source, for example, I would choose hyssop and frankincense and myrrh. Those are 3 things. Do you understand what I'm saying? If I want to cleanse and rejuvenate my space, I would choose, I don't know, my garden sage, maybe some mint for the rejuvenation, and probably hyssop again or something like that. Like I have to be very specific on the blends I'm using because I can only pick 3. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now when it comes to time, I don't just choose 3. I'll choose things and anything that can be divided by 3. So 3, 6, 9. I don't usually go past 9. So my rituals are 3 days or 6 days or 9 days, you see. So in building my practice, the number 3 became my number. I felt that worked. Now that doesn't go for everybody. Maybe your number is 5. Maybe your number is 7. Maybe you've got a very specific reason as to why it's 5 or 7. Like all of those things are valid. All of that is valid. I will say this though, that because this person is picking 27 herbs, like you're using your entire apothecary at that point. So, in my mind, this work is muddied and muddled. In my mind, this work lacks clarity from the jump because you are using 27 different earthbound spirits, 27 different herbs. And even though they may all fall into a general category of cleansing, protection, money, they all do different things under that category. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, and that was never more apparent to me, that idea that it's not just general categories, that every herb spirit has its own niche, until I started to grow. It occurred to me when I started to grow my own herbs, when I started my own garden. And I watched how the mint grew versus how the chocolate mint grew. When I took them and brewed them and tasted them, and I realized that this tastes different. This smells different. This elicits a different reaction from me. When I saw what it took to grow sage and hyssop, and I saw the sturdiness or the temperament of that plant, that's when I realized, okay, yeah, you might have this thing, you might have this general overarching spirit of cleansing, protection, money, whatever. But as an individual organism, you have your own personal, niche spirit that you also take care of, like that you also embody. I think the best example of that is when I grew catnip. So, catnip drives cats crazy, and so it's always used in attraction work, specifically usually in like love attraction work. But I started to use it in like my money work, my fast money work, to it, like especially fast money work when I needed money right now. Because as I watched as it grew, it is the most sturdy and the most like it yearns for abundance. I have had the same catnip plant for, I don't know, 3 years now, and it's potted. Make sure I change the soil out and all that. Like I take care of it, but like over the winter, I just cut it back. Like that's all I do is cut it back. And snow can get in that, birds can pick at it, like anything can happen to this catnip plant. And inevitably, when it's time to flower again, it's growing. I can see the little buds of green. It is sturdy. It's sturdy and it's abundant. Like it wants to be abundant. It will crawl out of its own pot. Like it'll lean and try to find any soil in other pots just to root down. So I realized, yes, this is used for attraction work. Sure, you can use it in love attraction. Okay. Make your significant other go crazy for you, like a cat goes crazy for catnip. But also, like, it's a part of the mint family. And in doing so, and being a part of the mint family, it wants to grow, and it doesn't take a lot for it to spread. Like it wants to spread and be abundant, if you will. So I started using the catnip in money work. But back to the original question. 27 herbs, you can, if you want to. Personally, how I hoodoo, I would tell you that that's too many. It's too many because the spirit of every herb, although may have an overarching like tenet or overarching spirit, there is a certain directness, a certain niche that those spirits also embody. And you want to, when you plan out your work, you want to use what is most efficient to do in your work. Hoodoo is about being practical. You understand? Like it's all about being practical. So, and 27 doesn't sound practical to me. That said, a way around that, if you want a catch-all, candle, herb, whatever, like this is your personal blend of herbs, I would suggest turning them into a powder. So how do you do that? So first, you want to make sure they're dried. So if you collected it, harvested it, or grew it, you want to dry it out. And you can go on YouTube to see how to dry out stuff. It's not that hard to do. Once it's dry, then you would take it into your mortar and pestle or take it into your coffee grinder. I'm a big fan of doing both. I first take it into my mortar and pestle and grind it out because it helps to extract the remaining oils and fragrance out of the herb. It wakes up the herbs, for use. And then if you want a finer powder, you throw it in your coffee grinder. Coffee grinder is going to make that super, super fine, just like coffee grounds. And now you have a powder you can use. You understand? You can use this powder to add to a water alcohol mixture. Now you've got a spray. You could use it to dust or sweep with. So you add it to like baking soda and put it over, your carpet or your floor or wherever. Let it sit and then vacuum it up. You can put it outside your front door, like lining it like a barrier. Like there's all sorts of things you can do with the powder, and it's a little easier to maneuver than, 27 whole herbs. So yeah, I would go for that. If I was going to use 27, but I would never use 27 because, like I said, a tenet of my work as a hoodoo is to be practical, efficient, and specific in my work. So 3 is my number. Yeah. Okay. I picked some easier questions for me today because the first time I recorded this, I chose a longer question about protections and getting around protections, and the person was a hoodoo, but they were seeing Luciferian witches, and they knew for sure that this person was hexing them, but they also didn't really have any real facts about it. It was a lot. And I think I recorded the whole thing and I listened back and I was like, I'm exhausted just listening to this. Like, it's too much. So I hope, the 2 questions were at least helpful for somebody, because the more complex one definitely hit file 13. You've made it to the end of the podcast. Congratulations. Thank you so much for being here with me today and for staying as long as you did. If you're still here and you liked what you heard, please give my podcast a like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. And if you're on another platform, please still subscribe to my podcast so my uploads will come to you every Sunday. Yeah. Before we go, I know I have to do this every time. Before we go, I want to let you guys know that you deserve the world. That your spirituality is complex and it's worth understanding and it deserves respect. I want to let you know that anything that you want to reach for, you can grab, and that if you call for your blessings, they will come to you. I'll see you guys next time.